Chacon. Director Gedney.
Here.
Director Grajeda.
Here.
Director Hawkins.
Here.
Director Oscui.
Here.
Director Vasquez. President Apodaca.
Here. Director Hawkins, would you please lead us in the invocation? Director Skewy, lead us in Pledge of Allegiance.
Please bow your heads. Our Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for all the blessings that you've bestowed upon us. Please watch over each and every one of us here today, and thank you for allowing us to meet at the Central Basin office here today. Please open up our hearts and our minds as we are about to hear a lot of information, that we will be able to absorb it and act upon it properly. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Please face the flag, put your right hand over your heart, and repeat after me. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have certification, Madam Secretary?
The agenda was posted.
Public comments and presentations, do we have any?
I have no public comment or presentation cards.
Consent calendar and financial report, item 3.
Good morning,
Morning.
Mr. President, Board of Directors. First item is 3A, demands. Usually I just have limited comments, and today I just wanted to highlight 3 items on the demands list. I think it's the 6th item down. Check 2 on 526, environmental systems research. This is our annual license agreement for the GIS software for approximately $24,000. If you go about halfway down the page to Keenan & Associates, check numbers 21561. That's our annual insurance premium for J. Prima for about $225,000. And a few lines underneath that is check number 21565, Pacific Coast Elevator. This is the 50% down payment. They need to order parts, and so that was $28,000. So that concludes my comments, and willing to answer any questions.
Questions, anyone?
I just have an observation. I've got extremely old eyes. Is there any way we can get this report as a 12 font rather than maybe a 3 or 4 font?
There's a lot of information on it, but we'll try our best.
Appreciate it.
I think my eyes would enjoy that too.
Director Hawkins, anything? Okay. Nope. We're okay.
I make a motion to approve the consent calendar, Mr. President.
Have a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Director Chacon. Director Gedney.
Yes.
Director Grajeda.
Yes.
Director Hawkins.
Yes, I just want to abstain from legal bills.
Mr. President, I have a question for Director Hawkins. If you abstain from legal bills, you're abstaining from all the work that Nossaman does, which means you're abstaining from the work. Was the action items on the resolutions for the debt disclosure, the standby discharge, were those all reviewed by the attorneys? Kevin?
Yes, I will.
So you're abstaining all that work, which means if we're not going to have that work reviewed by the attorney, I don't know how we can have that work before the board. It's a general question. Director Hawkins, you're abstaining from the work he's doing here right now.
Exactly.
But he's doing work, sir. He's working. It doesn't matter that there's going to be things that the board approves that I may not approve, but once the board approves it, we go along with that. That's the agreement. That's what we all do.
I was against it in the very beginning. I tried to get rid of them several months ago.
I understand.
A year ago.
I understand,
I've been against it ever since then. I haven't changed my position on anything.
Okay.
We don't need a majority vote, do we, on this?
Yeah.
You need a five-member board
We will
vote.
bring it back and get it when there's a larger part of the vote. We've always gotten the attorney's bill approved at a time, and I happen to agree with Director Grajeda on this, though. This is there's a proper time and a place for voting for the attorney. It's just when we renew the contract. Once we renew it, then you need to analyze the bills and treat them in the way they're presented.
Shouldn't we then have an alternate motion to exclude that portion from the consent calendar?
I withdraw my motion to approve the consent calendar as presented and make a motion to approve the consent calendar with the, without considering Nossaman's bill.
So it's just that demand number that he's abstaining from?
Yes, Maggie.
He was okay with the rest of the
I'm okay
consent
with the rest
calendar.
of it.
It's just that demand number. So we'll
Yes.
make a note that he's abstaining from that demand number and we'll
And yes.
bring it back.
So I need a second.
So we have a second by Director John Oskui right now in this case?
Yeah.
Director Oskui,
Yes.
Director Vasquez, President Apodaca.
Yes. Item 4, fiscal year 2018 budget performance, March 31st, 2018.
If it pleasures the board, we could go over 3B, or we could go straight to 4.
They just
Just for
approved it.
clarification, the motion was to approve the consent calendar?
Yeah, I must have jumped the gun. I apologize. I saw the financial statement.
It's consent, but if you want to have a report, let's go ahead and have a report. Just to recap item 4.
Just for 4, skip 3B?
No, 4. You were going to give a report on the fiscal year, right?
You have
Performance?
3B as well, Director, that...
Okay, I'm sorry, yes. Both of them.
Okay. So item 3B, investments, the total district's unrestricted and restricted reserves were 12.1 million as of April 30th. It's up a little bit, 300,000 from the prior month. The overall increase is related to the standby charge revenue for the spring, related to the April 10th deadline. The unrestricted portfolio is about 6.6 million. Leaf increased about $1 million. That was due to the standby. I thought I would just if I say committee, I apologize. I know this is a special board meeting, but if you look at the table for the local agency investment fund on page 2 of the memo, you can see rates have significantly increased over the last year. Not quite double, but going from 0.88 in April to 1.52 in March, we've had some significant increases over the last year. Just wanted to point that out. And lastly, there was one item of non-compliance that was found. A certificate of deposit exceeded the $250,000 FDIC insurance limit. When staff noticed this item, the investment was properly sold at par, not at a loss nor a gain, bringing the portfolio into compliance. Staff has also implemented procedures to ensure this issue does not occur in the future. That concludes my report. Can answer any questions.
Questions, anyone? No questions. Go ahead.
Okay, item number 4, budget performance. Usually what we do is examine the tables, and if you go to table 1 on page 2, this is a point in time where we're 75% through the year, 9 out of the 12 months. So if you just kind of keep that 75% in mind, if you look at the variance column, it's toward the right-hand side of the table, and the percentage of budget, you'll see the first line, administrative surcharge, is at 75%, so we're doing very nicely there. If you skip down a few lines to 75% on recycled sales, that's also a good percentage. And standby, a couple lines down further, that's also at 75. I usually say it in the committee, and I'll say it again here, that the standby, we've done that on an accrual basis this year. You'll see last year that was all booked in the general ledger when received. However, we're doing that on an accrual basis. That's just for the chart purposes. Now, if you go back up to the replenishment surcharge, you'll see that the percentage of budget is 51%. It does not include the April deliveries. This report is as of March. So with the April deliveries to WRD for replenishment, that will put us at 94% of budget. So that will help us in the overall, if you look at the total net revenue line, and also in that percentage of budget variance column, it's at 71. That will help us with that replenishment sales in succeeding months. If you go down to the net expense line, you'll see engineering and others, again, looking at the variance column. Engineering is at 85%. There was a significant increase from the prior month. We were at 69, which is approximately what the 8 out of 12 month was supposed to be at. And some of the change there in engineering was the Liberty payments made in March from some of the, we had a little overlap during the transition in outsourced recycled water operations. And if you look at the line below that, others, that's more detail on table 2, we'll get to that, but that's the majority of our expenses, and that is at 66%. So overall, total net expense percentage of budget is at 70%, which is better than 75. So two additional items I wanted to just mention is the budget surplus. If you look at the bottom line now of this table, in the second column, fiscal year 18 year-to-date actual, that is at 1.3 million. That moved about 400,000 unfavorable from the prior month. That's something I previously described, some of the reasons for that. So if there's no questions, I'll move to table 2. In table 2, briefly, there are 2 departments that are over. Again, remember 75%, and we're going to go down the columns, down the column rather, of percentage of budget in the variance. The second to the right, you'll see finances at 85%. That's my department. And we're a little over because of the letter of credit. If you recall, they billed us in arrears, and so that payment was fully paid, about $50,000 in the current year, and increased fees in the current year also for the full year. And also toward the end, when we do the renewal, will be another increase. And then if you go down 2 lines from finance into legal, I think the board has discussion and staff on this item, and the board recently approved an increase in legal fees. Some of the legal fees increases, as discussed in the memo, are related to AB 1794, the reimbursement filing and litigation. But if you look at the bottom line, again, on total department expense for that column, percentage of budget, that's at 66%. That ties to the previous line in table 1. Just wanted to point that out. Those conclude my comments, and I can answer any questions.
Questions?
No, thank you.
No questions.
Sorry for jumping the gun.
No worries.
Good report.
No questions.
All right, agenda item 5. All right. I'm going to be up here for a while, so.
Okay, then just go on and don't stop.
Sure, okay. This item is recommended by the district's bond council. This is a proposed debt disclosure policy, and it really documents the district's current practices as it relates to compliance with issuing debt, both with that issuance and with continuing disclosure requirements. Briefly, the policy is something that describes the process of issuing a preliminary official statement, POS, and an official statement, an OS. creating drafts of these documents, the distribution of them, conference calls that are required to review, the board approval, making revisions and certification, things to that nature. Also processes specific to actually completing the district section of both the POS and OS are detailed. And finally, periodic training, annual compliance, and continuing disclosure and material events disclosures are also detailed in that. I've been through this training, and it is extremely important, so I also want to, if it pleasures the board, to actually read the second and third paragraphs verbatim due to the significance and importance of this policy. Since the board has issued debt previously and approved debt issuance in 2016, 2010, and 2008, the district must comply with anti-fraud rules of federal security laws, including Section 17 of the Securities Act of 1933 and Section 10B of the Securities and Exchange Act of 1934. And regulations adopted by the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, under those acts, including Rule 10b-5 under the SEC Act of 1934. The foundation of these laws and regulations is that the issuer must provide all material information to potential investors related to proposed and previously issued local agency debt offerings. Information provided to investors must be free from any material misstatements. Also, the proposed debt issuance must not withhold material information regarding either the issuer's financial condition or the transparent and comprehensive description of the proposed debt issuance that potential investors would need in order to make an investment decision. When issuing debt securities, information is deemed to be material if a substantial likelihood exists that a reasonable investor would consider it important in deciding whether to purchase the issuer's debt securities. That concludes my report. I know this is the first time the board has seen this, and we have a financial advisor here, and in addition, I believe Doug Brown is here. So he's our bond counsel, and if you have any detailed questions on this and other items that are related to refinancing, they are available for any more detailed questions that may require their participation.
Questions? Director?
Go ahead.
Andrew, I didn't think this was the first, I thought the board had considered as a discussion item before the reason for approving a resolution for adopting a debt disclosure policy. Isn't this the second time we've seen it?
That is actually the debt management policy, and that goes and describes when should we issue debt, what types of debt. This is pretty much, after that has been, this is kind of like the second phase of that. Once that's been decided, how do you create the documents, and there's required training, kind of some of the discussion I had earlier.
Thank you, Andrew. Question, I guess, right at the beginning. What's changed that we need to do a policy at this time?
That's an excellent question. So the best answer is that there's been a lot of enforcement action by the SEC, and there's been fines made against general managers, against finance directors, against city managers throughout the nation. Some, maybe I'll just be in general, some have been in the Atlanta area, some have been in the Central Valley of California, and so our bond counsel feels it's important, and some of those rulings have stated in there that there weren't actual policies documented. So this is what we're doing is in essence documenting the existing and current practices for that compliance.
Next question, you mentioned debt issuance for the periods or the years 2016, 2010, and 2008. This proposed policy will cover all of those, and we're confident that when that was issued, there were no issues, right? Or is this going to this proposed policy will just cover those periods of time?
I think that verbiage specifically is that we have a history of issuing in debt. And so part of this policy is specific to the continuing annual disclosure. So that would apply to those issuances.
Okay.
However, as we go forward in the future, most of the policy is related to creating the official statement, the POS. Those have already been done
Okay.
for those prior issuances.
But if the
Does that
SEC...
help?
Well,
Does that answer your
let me just ask this question, that if the SEC were to have a question about those three particular years, this policy really wouldn't cover those, or not? I mean, it sounds to me like the policy is on a going forward basis.
Exactly right.
A proposal, but for these other three issuances, the SEC could come back and ask questions, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And do we anticipate that? Do we have any potential issues we might want to discuss? Or is this just a kind of a going forward policy that is a best practice with respect to issuing debt?
There are no issues that we've identified at this time. This is just a proactive item before the board.
Okay, but the SEC still could, come back and take a look if they so deem.
Exactly.
Okay.
Those three debt issuances were under the SEC Act.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Hawkins, any questions? Nope.
So if the board
Your
wants
motion?
make some, yes. So before you is the board approving the resolution, adopting the debt disclosure policy.
Mr. President, move to approve and adopt resolution number 05-18-950.
Have a second.
I'll second. Okay, that's okay.
Dr. Hawkins. Roll call, please.
Director Chacon? Director Gedney?
Yes.
Director Grajeda?
Yes.
Director Hawkins?
Yes.
Director Oscui?
Yes.
Director Vasquez? President Apodaca?
Yes.
So
For the record, I would like to have every time we go through this, if it's a unanimous vote, let us know it's a unanimous vote. Okay? Thank you.
So agenda item number 6. This is something that's before you. It's the annual process to initiate proceedings for the standby charge. We've had this in place since 1991. I have some brief comments, but this is, in essence, you're adopting a resolution to initiate the standby charge. In 1991, this item was adopted by the board. The standby charge helps in the financing and in construction of the recycled water system. This revenue was targeted for O&M. In addition, includes payment for debt service that's related to the recycled water system. Again, this resolution initiates the proceedings. We'll come back to you in June at that board meeting and adopt the final and hold a public hearing. If you saw the attached engineer's report, that's a legal requirement by Government Code 54984. Similar to each year, it produces 3.3 million of revenue, and it remains at $10 per acre, or the portion thereof. The rate has not changed. So with that, staff is recommending the motion that is attached that initiates proceedings for the continuation of the standby charge for the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2018.
Chair, I have some questions. Is the representative from Wildan here today?
I don't believe we have anyone from Wildan here.
So, I'm looking at this, and how long has Wildan been working on this? For the district, do you know, Andrew?
I believe it's been approximately 5 years.
And do we do this type of report, Kevin, do you know, just about every year?
Yes, it's the same report every year. Just
Okay. So my question is, I don't think you read it, but summary, in 1991, the district imposed a standby charge on all properties within its service area to assist with recovering the costs of drought proofing through conservation development of recycled water system. Properties within the service area benefit from the district's ongoing efforts to increase the availability of recycled water for non-potable uses that would have otherwise been served with potable water. Revenue produced by the standby charge program was targeted for the development and operation of the recycled water program, which includes payment of the debt service in capital letters, it should be capital letters, on the district outstanding debt related to the recycled water system. Why are they constantly giving us a report that doesn't address increasing that parcel charge? Why in their report in the introduction they talk about this, and that parcel charge, which was begun in 1991, and we had probably no debt, and it was set at $10. Now what's our debt, Andrew?
Approximately 40 million.
40 million. And we've not addressed it. They're not addressing it. We're not asking them to address it.
Well,
How
state
does that
law,
make any sense?
state law and it's the famous one from Howard Jarvis in 1913, thank you. In 1978, this needs to go to the voters for any increases.
That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking why in this report doesn't it talk about the fact that that this agency, based on the first paragraph of the summary of the staff report and based on the introduction of Wildan, why aren't they saying to us year after, unless I missed it in the report, year after year after year, you folks need to review that parcel charge because you're now 100 miles behind the 8 ball.
I'm sorry. I don't think that's their job to do that. Their job is to prepare an engineer's report, which is by law required every year to be done so you can justify the rates. Okay? So it is up to the board to decide if you want to increase it or not, like any other assessment district. You have a choice. And the choice is if you're short, if you feel like you're short, the choice is to go to the voters with a majority, but it requires a majority vote because it's a parcel tax, a special tax, to pass a different number than the $10.
The report is based on stating whether or not the charge is reasonable based on the services provided. And in this particular case, it's far more reasonable because of the magnitude of our debt. That should be a proponent of what we're asking them to do. It should be in that report.
That's not the job of the engineer's report. That's not what they do. They justify the $10. By law, we are required to justify the $10 that we are charging.
I understand that, John, but the thing about it is that if we were proposing this, if this is in this report, we would have a history of stating this parcel charge is too low and needs to be addressed.
But that's a discussion for the board and staff.
And actually, it has not been too low. It's been adequate to pay up until just recently with some of the refinancing. It's been adequate to pay the debt service on us, which is its intent. But I get your point. As you know, we are working on it. Next year, we'll be taking to the board a whole program for developing an additional one. We've talked about what that costs to do, but this is a specific focused on this.
I understand, Kevin. The trouble is that we have to put down the baseline of why the parcel charge should go up. And maybe we've been paying everything since, we're going to be getting to it where our sales are less than 50% of where they were 10 years ago. Maybe at that point in time, they should have been looking at that. But I don't know how the $3 million is covering. This says includes payment of debt service, outstanding debt related, it covers development and operation of the recycled water program and debt service.
Kevin, let me pose a hypothetical. Let's assume that we decide to, next year, to come up with a report, do a study, and the study says that we can easily collect $15, $16 to address those shortcomings. And then we go to the voters. We have to, right? And then it gets shut down. The voters don't approve it. Can we collect?
We would do it separate from this one. I don't think you ever want to risk the one you have right now. We would do a separate one for separate purposes. We may define differently the area, may include conservation, and that's what we'll be coming to you next year with, because it's a year-long process to do that. We can't do it in the short time we have here, but This one here is focused on a particular thing, really the recycled water system. That's what it's being used for. The other one may be used for conservation, may be used for potable water development, whatever is the need for the service area.
Yeah, my comment is that each year when we look at this, we should be looking at everything and not just one thing. We should be laying down the work that states that what we're doing and why we're doing it and the cost and the benefit of it. It states it right here, but it doesn't go to that next level. And I understand maybe we didn't ask them to do that, Director Askewy, but that should be what we're doing, especially looking at this. That's my point.
And thank you for the clarification on that. I just one additional comment. Now I understand your question. This one is specific to the recycled water system. If you look back at some of our past, you can see potable sales really decreasing. You can see the replenishment sales really decreasing. So as the general manager just stated, some of this additional parcel charge in the future will have a different purpose than this one for recycled. So conservation, things to that effect. So.
Mr. Chair, if there are any other questions, I'll make a motion to approve this item.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Chaperon. Director Gedney.
Yes.
Director Grajeda.
Yes.
Director Hawkins.
Yes.
Director Osculi.
Yes.
Director Vasquez. President Apodaca.
Yes.
Motion passes by unanimous vote.
So agenda item 7 and item 9 go together. When staff created the agenda and the staff reports, we thought we were a little further along in the agreement, negotiation with all the respective parties. So both agenda items 7 and 9, and by the way, 9 is for the Financing Corporation, 7 is for the district. And just briefly, the Financing Corporation is involved in any of the COPs. So that's in the 2008 and the 2010 bonds. But back to my overview, we're going to change this to an information item, both 7 and 9, because the documents just are not as far along in the negotiation process with those other parties. We are hoping to bring that back very soon, potentially maybe at the end of this month. But we will update the board as to the progress on those negotiations. So this item was discussed at the last month's board meeting. It relates to the creation of a fixed payment account or a lockbox. We kind of discussed some of the particulars about that. We think that the financial advisor and bond counsel feel this is required to kind of entice parties because of the subordinated debt is the only option. If you look in the memo, option number 4, if you recall from the presentation too. So this would create that lockbox. The money would go in for the standby charge. It would go into a trustee, a separate holder of those funds. It would go in November. They would pay the February interest debt service out of this and the principal. Then more money would come in from the county, standby charge. They collect into this trustee account, this lockbox account, and then debt service would be paid in August. And the district would receive all of its funds back, any remaining funds, on August 2nd. So between like that November timeframe and August 1st, that's when our reserves would be a little lower, but we'd be back at just either scenario in the same cash position and reserves on August 2nd. This lockbox is not subject to change once this goes into effect. It's pretty much final. If debt service ever exceeds $3.3 million, then we'd have to start putting in money from the monthly per CFS water meter service charge. And we feel that the effects of having this lockbox definitely outweigh, the benefit of having the lockbox definitely outweighs the impact to the district's reserves. And one final thing is, because of the subordinated debt being the only option that was, and this requirement for the lockbox is pretty much due to the district's financial condition in the past not meeting the DCR as required at 115%. You're going to hear this DCR, debt coverage ratio. I think that's a familiar term, but I just want to make sure. You're going to hear DCR probably 100 times more throughout this Finance Committee meeting today. So that concludes my comments. Again, it's the agreements that are still in negotiation that's kind of holding this up. This is just an info item, so you can just receive and file at this time, both items 7 and 9.
Questions?
I have a question. As I reviewed this issue, I thought, and heard it the last time, I thought it was a very good idea, and I was all for it. But what concerns me now is the conversation we just had. I feel that it's important that we go to the voters and raise our standby charge. I think it's very important. I think without that, we shouldn't have a recycled water program, because that's really how we should pay for it. But with the conversation we just had just a minute ago, if we were to approve the lockbox, and we were to go to the voters, let's say in a year and 2 years, and they voted the standby down, which I don't see how they could, because I don't see that we would look at the past. It seems to me whatever we put on it would be going forward.
Yeah, we won't risk the existing one.
Exactly.
It would be a totally new one.
Yeah, so because I wouldn't want to.
Yeah.
How would that work out if we approve the lockbox, and then through this parcel charge we lost it? Then what would happen? Would that put us in some kind of jeopardy with the financial institution?
No, it's a great question, and the documents right now are very specific, and so they talk about the parcel charge, the existing parcel charge. So, any additional ones, it's not going to have an expansion into other areas.
No, I was thinking the other way. If we lost the parcel charge, I don't see how that.
No, we're not going to.
That's gonna be another layer on top
This would be a separate layered on top of it.
Okay, all right, good. Then I don't have any further questions, Mr. Chair.
Question?
No, this is the only thing, this isn't really new. The verbiage is new, but that's about it, because when we originally voted on the bonds, that's what we looked at, is the parcel charge that was coming in, that would pay for the bonds, and then we would live off the revenue that came in off of the potable water. We're just putting a lockbox in between here from what we originally started out with. That's the only difference I see in this whole thing. So, it gives the bond people more security, but other than that, it hasn't really changed much.
What are the costs?
I move on the motion.
Receive and file, right?
It's just information.
No action.
It
They're
doesn't
gonna
change
come
from
back with no
action.
action. But Andrew, I understood that time is of the essence on this one because of what we need to achieve before December, right? So
It is.
You're going to be coming back soon, right?
Immediately after this board meeting, we're going into that issue
Okay,
and
fair enough. Thank
the
you.
negotiation of
At
that.
this month's board meeting, we'll be bringing it back.
Okay.
Okay.
Continue.
Item
Okay.
8.
Item number 8. This is the defeasance. Again, this is something that was mentioned at the prior board meeting in the presentation. This is a defeasance. That's a fancy word for prepayment. I hope that doesn't offend our bond counsel. So I like calling this the prepayment of the August 2018 debt service. In essence, to help in the refinancing, again, our bond counsel, financial advisor, and staff are recommending that we take the money this is a one-time only event. We take money that we would have paid in August, in just a few months from now. Instead of paying it in August, we pay it in June, just 2 months earlier. This is a one-time help to our DCR, this debt coverage ratio. The legal definition is required debt service. So if we defease it early, then we will not have this as a required debt service for the next fiscal year that greatly enhances our ability to meet the DCR in the next fiscal year. But this is a one-time thing, and only just a 2-month, impact to our reserves. We catch up August 2nd of 2018. It's about $1.5 million.
So if I remember correctly, that's partly the reason you could bring up the ratio to 125 for next year, 125%, if I remember correctly, that number.
So we're going to talk about this a little bit, that we're required to do 115.
Right.
Under this old methodology, and when I say our existing methodology, we're going to discuss later that the financial advisor is recommending that we, under the existing DCR calculation, that we meet 125% for a little cushion because of our history not meeting the DCR. We're going to mention that in the information item regarding the budget. So was that answering your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I understand what we're doing, and I think it's appropriate to go ahead and pay the money up front. I'm not so much 100% behind going after the 125% DCR. We've set the bar high before and missed that goal, and it seems to me that we should set the bar at somewhere where we're absolutely certain we can hit. And it seems to me the 115 is pretty solid. The 125, there's too many variables that take us up and down. I think I'm going to have some issues with that one, but regarding this particular issue, I see the importance of paying the money up front, which is also going to help us with what you're trying to do now, correct? Regarding the bonds.
Yes. So just to elaborate a little further, the existing methodology that we have, we're going to talk about this in the budget. The way that we calculate the DCR, we have to meet the 115. The proposed budget, we're trying, and the board, we need your input on a few items to help us. We're currently at 117. The proposal, the budget presentation will show you at 117. We're trying to get to 125. Now, with this item here, this will dramatically change the 125 for the next fiscal year to probably something like 1.75. So, to address your question, I think I have it's going to be a very high probability of meeting the legal definition of the DCR next year, because the denominator is reduced. The numerator, if you don't mind me getting a little technical here, the numerator is the net revenue. We're not proposing any difference under the existing methodology versus this for this item for net revenue. However, the debt service that we have existing currently is $3.3 million approximately per year. We're cutting that by $1.5 million, so it's going to be, the denominator is $1.8 million. So that's going to dramatically increase the probability of us meeting the DCR next year. Now, on a future, your comments regarding the future for succeeding fiscal years is very appropriate. However, the reason why we're doing this is to allow us to have this 1 year get out of jail free, if you will, for the DCR. It could be 175 2.0. It's the probability of meeting the DCR for this next fiscal year dramatically increases because of this item.
I understand that, Andrew. We're talking about two different things. I'm for this item. If there's no more questions, I'll make the motion, unless you want to state the motion then.
Sure. The recommended motion is to adopt Resolution 05-18-953, authorizing the execution of escrow agreements for the 2010A and 2008B, approving, in essence, this defeasance of debt as stated in the memo and resolution.
I second that. Roll call, please.
Director Chucklin? Director Gedney?
Yes.
Director Grajeda?
Yes.
Director Hawkins?
Yes.
Director Oscui?
Yes.
Director Vasquez? President Apodaca?
Yes.
Vote passes by unanimous vote. Yes.
Now, agenda item number 9 was previously received and filed, if I recall correctly. So agenda item number 10 is consideration of the budget. I don't know if you want to stand up, stretch a little bit, because this is going to be a presentation that we have just a few slides. We're going to go fast through some slides. So with that, I'll proceed.
We'll recess for 5 minutes.
Okay, yeah, because it's going to
Mentally
be,
get ready.
it's going to be an hour, so.
I got it.
So this is agenda item number 10. This is a draft budget, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, why we've called it a draft. But the purpose, you can see the slide. We've shown the slide in the past, so we've got the background. You can see conservation and lower water sales has been very, very prominent in the forefront of the district. In addition, some things like the state audit, the LRP, the local resource program have had impacts. So this is a draft budget. It's not a proposed budget. We're not ready. And the reason is that we need the board's input. Like I mentioned earlier, the DCR is currently in this draft budget is at 117%. However, our financial advisor is recommending 125. A few of the things that we've gone through, reaching out to purveyors, other entities and related parties that want to have input, including the board. If you look to the prior cuts in April of last year, so just a little over a year ago, there was 573,000 of cuts done in April of 17. Approximately another, if you add the expense and the capital reductions on this slide, that's about 900 or approximately $1 million. So the sum of, and these were done in September of 17, that puts us at cuts of about $1.6 million. Then we had a board meeting in January on the 12th of this year, and the general manager proposed cuts, and the board approved those to the tune of $137,000. And also at that same meeting, the board adopted further cuts of $100,000 there. So we're very close to about $2 million of cuts over the last year or so. You can see there's 8 different items that were not approved in January, just a few months ago, and we're going to re-examine those a little later in the meeting. Our general manager is going to be going through those, and the board will be asked to vote on each and every one and consider each and every one. So just a few items that are currently under study. In yellow, you can see those are ones that are actually being worked on currently. There's 2 that are not. The pension debt, we're not quite ready for that. That's more of a long-term idea. And also, we've explored the sponsorships or grants related to the water education program, and those have not panned out so far.
No, we have not explored them. We'll go into it later.
Okay. So what are some of the revisions post-January that have gone into the budget? So you can see a long list here of items. I'll just kind of hit a few. Because of the resignation of an elected director, the costs have increased for election expenses by about $230,000. And now the election expenses are at $700 for the next fiscal year. We did raise some of our sales projections for potable and replenishment. 3 positions are in the budget is eliminated, proposed to be eliminated. These are kind of some of the high-level items. If you look at this next slide, we wanted to give you just a few more details into the budget that's proposed, that's in draft form. First, salaries and expenses. I'm not going to go through each item, but the salaries and expenses are currently drafted at $2.8 million. This is a 20% reduction from the prior year. You can see the letter of credit, number 3 has increased. We have on item number 6, a 15% reduction in the O&M contract going from Liberty to Infomark. Recycled water cost number 8, $530,000. And 16, I also wanted to highlight, the unfunded pension liability is increasing about $80,000 a year. This year, this next fiscal year, the draft budget is at $369,000. It's going up to $750,000 over the next few years, and it's about $80,000 a year increase. So let's go into the draft budget. First, I wanted to highlight the impact of election costs. Election costs, you can see in fiscal 19, skip a year to fiscal 21, skip a year to fiscal 23. So the election costs are very significant. The seats go from 3 in 19 to 3 in 21 to 4 in 23. And range between 7 and almost 9% of our budget. It's approximately $2.5 million that's going to be spent over those next 5 fiscal years. This slide provides a comparison, if you will, what we are forecasting in 18 to what the draft 19 budget contains. Generally, if you look in total, the operating costs increase slightly. However, most of that increase, like I've mentioned before, is in the administrative and board services, the top line, due to the election, the $700,000. For fiscal 18-19, the pie chart, we thought we would show, you can see some of the larger items, recycled operations and other outsourcing, kind of toward the top left. That's 32%. Wages and benefits are at 24%. And one item that the board just passed, if you look kind of toward maybe 7 o'clock, if you think of the graph as a clock, principal and unfunded pension payments is at 3%. That's due to that $1.5 million item that the board the defeasance or prepayment of the principal. As a comparison, you can go to the 2017 and 18 pie chart, and I thought I'd just hit those items again. Recycled operations and other outsourcing, top left is 25. Wages and benefits is at 28. And fiscal 19, that's 24. Due to that reduction of 20% salary is proposed. And then, again, about 7 o'clock is the principal and unfunded pension payments of 14%. So there's a decrease in the draft budget for next fiscal year. On this slide, this is the fiscal 19 org chart as proposed, and of interest to the board are the items in yellow. So as an overall FTE in the top left, you can see the total FTE is proposed at 20.2.
So Andrew, are the yellow boxes that are going to remain vacant?
are non-budgeted vacant positions.
Correct. Some of them are currently occupied. But for the fiscal year 19,
For 1819.
for 1819, we have put those in yellow, as proposed in the draft budget. We also took
Can
the
you go back to that slide?
Sure.
What's the impact of the internships to that slide? The internship under,
The JS?
yeah, well, I think external affairs and also engineering.
Well, the interns that we have,
But I'm looking at the slide.
yeah, the interns that we have are extremely helpful to the organization, and we usually replace them. They serve usually 2 years, and then we replace them in. So we have some that are shown in here. There's an engineering intern, and another one shown in external affairs.
No, I would think everybody's important, Kevin. I'm just looking at those particular boxes and saying, if you need to cut, what is the cost of the district of those internships?
Well, first of all, they're the lowest cost employee, and the type of work that they do is the lowest cost work. By cutting them, you then force assuming the work has to be done, and it does, you're forcing your higher paid people to do lower level work. So you can't really optimize a budget by cutting interns. You have to make substantial cuts of people who make substantial income.
Just for the sake of discussion, do we know roughly how much do they cost?
$14,000 for that intern,
Total or each?
each.
Because they don't receive any benefits, obviously.
And frankly, with the lack of positions that we have in here, interns and temporary employees is how we get through things like the summer or a big push if the grant comes in and stuff like that.
So roughly about $1,100 a month per intern.
Yes.
That sounds high.
Well, $14,000, yeah.
Yeah.
It's something.
Yeah, they're limited to no more than 900 hours a year.
Right.
But most of them don't do that. Most of them are 10 to 15 hours a week. Keep going.
So also, during this budget process, we asked all departments to provide a forecast over the next 5 years. And so where possible, and they had the information exact, we were able to receive that. In other situations where kind of the future was unknown, we just put a 2 to 3% inflation factor in. And again, you can see in the 19, 21, and 23, those amounts bottom line are about 10 million, 10.4, and 10.8 million. And that's mostly due to the election expenses that we've highlighted previously in the administrative and board services, the first line. You can see the impact of the election to those years.
So Andrew, I understand the difference of about $700,000 between 19 and 20. That's the expenditure for the election that you have to go through this year, right? So the 1.69 will be 994 the following year, 2020 forecast, under the admin and board services, correct?
I'm sorry, I got your first sentence, but I didn't get the second one.
Well, you know, the 2019 draft, because of the election coming up, that's roughly about 1.6 million, 1.7. Now, next year, the forecast for the following year, 2020 forecast, is exactly that amount less.
The 700,000, right?
700,000. However, when we go to 2021, we are looking at adding another 1.3 million.
In administration and board services.
Right, and that is, again, we have another cycle of election.
It's still three directors, because that's it. That's Tuna's resignation. We have to do the election twice. And but the increase there, is there another reason other than the what?
Presidential election.
It's a president, that's right, because when we talk with, and Maggie chime in if you, but when we talk with the elections people, presidential elections have higher turnouts and we get a bigger bill.
I see.
And the
So-
assumption is based off of having about approximately 4 candidates for each of those seats.
Well,
To just be more expensive.
Yeah, and in the
2023,
that's when we have to reorganize, and our assumption is all 4 seats have to be put up, and some will be for 2 years and some will be for 4 years. After that, we'll just have 4 elected officials, and the cost should come down to about 500,000 to 600,000 every 2 years.
of course, because of the legislation, although there is the impact of the legislation of this one, but it's an unfunded mandate, right?
Yeah, and of course, they're fighting us on that, but that's a different
That's
discussion.
a different story.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, got it, thank you.
Yeah, and if you want to go back just a few slides, you can see the impact of the election.
Andrew, we have reserve funds for various reasons. Some agencies call it a rate stabilization. Why couldn't, for this year's budget going forward, why couldn't we consider some of these expenses that are one-time, taking them out of our rate stabilization fund and not add them to the overall budget?
That's an excellent question. And during the break, I wanted to try and weave this comment in. This is kind of a piggyback on your previous question, I think on a previous agenda item about the DCR, the 125. So pretty much the answer is that our financial advisor, they're very in tune with, they have rating agency presentations all the time. We need to get a rating agency, a rating for this refinance. And it's in their opinion that we need to achieve that 125 DCR for this fiscal year under the existing methodology. Even though we're going to be given the grace because of the change in the prepayment, the defeasance of the debt service, they still say that we need to achieve the 125 DCR. So we do not have the ability to, in essence, utilize reserves at this point. We either need to, and it's in their opinion too, that raising rates is the most preferable. It shows the longevity of the district, whereas cutting costs, while important, so I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, the basic point you said is though we have to make the debt covenant ratio from revenues coming in as opposed to from cuts. In my prior district, which was a district like this but did not have any debt, we used a stabilization fund that did it that way. So it was a steady cost of $300,000 or $400,000 a year that you put into the reserves, and when the election came, you paid it. We don't have the luxury of doing that here because we are into debt and we get rated every year. So, but this will pass hopefully after this 4-year period. That will be stable going forward with a predictable
The other
election.
thing I think is that generally, these sort of expenditures are considered to be operational costs because they're ongoing, they are not one-time expenditures, and you're supposed to be paying those through collecting whatever your revenue sources are, not just necessarily one-time dipping into the reserves.
And if the DCR was currently at 2.0, we could kind of move from maybe 2.0 in the fat years to maybe 1.5 in the lean years because of the election expenses. But because we're so close right now to that 1.15, there's really no cushion.
Andrew, can I make a point here? Kind of like to tell a little bit of experience that we had recently with the bond people. Their main concern was our fixed assets, because they know our rates are going to be going, our water sales are going to be going up and down. It's very volatile. And we're not looking at that. And I think this is something we should look at our shortfall and maybe go back to the meter charge and put a small amount on the meter charge, put a smaller amount on the rate increase, and then that would satisfy our bond people, because now that would bring our debt coverage ratio back up, and it would be a fixed asset to where they would be able to count that, because they're giving us a discounted value on our potable water as we raise it, because they know it's not fixed and it's going to go up and down. And I think that might be something, this is a draft budget that maybe we should look at in the draft as an option on putting something like this together, and seeing how that would work to satisfy the bond, even if we have to put a sunset clause on it, just to get us through here, to get our ratings back up, get us back up into the AAAs and the AAs, instead of dropping down to the Bs. This would help us do all that. And I don't think we're looking at that right now to make that change there to help our bond situation.
I feel if I comment to that, I could really step in a precarious.
No, I think we will get to that point when we go into the rate setting and the issue of fixed and stable. That's a
I just
good
wanted to
point.
bring it up now because
Yeah.
of the bonds and what we're talking about, because we've got so many outside expenses that we don't have any control
Yeah.
of.
No,
And we have an extra election this year that we never counted on, and we never know when this is coming back and forth. And so we can't cover, these extra million here and extra million there just because we're supposed to do it. Just because we're a state agency, we have to do it. Well, we haven't been covering for any of that, and now they're coming at us. We have to start looking at some way of protecting ourselves from these outside expenses.
Yes, sir.
So why don't I just,
When we get to the rate setting part of it, and at the end of the discussion, we'll talk some more about how we stabilize revenue.
So this next slide really is our principal and capital. If you can see in 2018, it's 2.8 million. In 2019 draft, it's 1.4. That's mostly related to the decrease of the prepayment that the board just passed. This kind of gives you a summary on the next slide of total expenses and principal and capital, going from 12.4 to 11.4. Again, don't forget about that 1.5 million that the board just passed. So we'd really be at like 12.9 is a comparison back and forth. Now let's transition to revenue. As you recall, there were two main options options 1 and 2 for the 2019 draft that were originally produced. The first option was the annual fixed meter charge. If you look at the bottom line and then go to the column option 1, 2019 draft, the second column of numbers, you can see 1.1 million was going to fill the hole, if you will, in revenue for option number 1. Option number 2, if you look at the second line, administrative surcharge, you can see between option 1 and option 2, that amount went from approximately 2 million, 1.96 million to 3.1. That was approximately a 65% rate increase. Both those were very drastic and had large impacts to our customers. Option 3 was requested by the purveyors group. In essence, that one was, if you do a comparison between there were no rate increases in that option whatsoever. We'll talk about the overall impacts a little bit later, but option 4 was a compromise option, and the most viable option, option number 3, just if you allow me to go back, it was not, we'll show later that that's not a viable option. So, like I said, option 1 had the meter charge. Option 2, a large increase. Option 3, I just want to highlight a few of these. It doesn't allow for the financial restructuring because of the low DCR and rating agencies' desire to have higher rates for the sustainability of the district. You can see number 2 lowers our reserve balances. Number 3 would assumption of all the proposed cuts in January that were not passed by the board. No rate increases, like I mentioned. Number 4 and number 9 would cut staff and benefits by approximately a third, $1.3 million. So again, a conclusion that it's not a viable option. Option 4 incorporates a lot of the approved expense reductions and many proposed cuts, and we also have some revenue enhancements. WRD, there was $300,000 of additional revenue in option 4. If you go to the second item, a lot more reasonable rate increases, almost a 19.8% increase in the administrative surcharge. That equates to a 5.1 overall increase in the MET rate for potable water, a reasonable 4.0% recycled water rate. And lastly, the existing water meter service charge per CFS in the draft budget is proposed to increase approximately $225,000, about 35%. So again, this is kind of our compromise option and is the most viable. If you look to some of the draft rates, this kind of gives them under each option. Along with the revenues.
Go back.
Sure.
Andrew, regarding the, I'm just going to look at option 4 for a minute. Regarding the MET rate, is that's nothing of ours. That's solely for Metropolitan and anticipation that they may increase their rate by 3% or maybe you already know it.
They've already done that.
It's been adopted, I believe it's a 3.4% rate increase.
Okay.
In ours, if you take the difference between the 5.1 and the 3.4, ours would be about a 1.7% overall rate increase to the Met.
Okay.
Total rate.
Now, the standby, the administrative surcharge, that's going up by 19.8%. That's the meter charge?
That's the amount per acre foot that we charge for potable.
Oh, I'm sorry. So can you expand on that a little bit for me?
Sure. So
How that impacts our customer. Let's say they're using 5,000 acre feet.
5,000 acre feet, that would equate to a, if you look at the existing rate.
Is that a 90% increase hit to that 5,000 acre?
If you look at the existing rate column, it's the first column, that's at 1,128. The potable rate is 1,128. And if you jump over then to option 4, the rate would go to 1,185. Now, that's a 5% increase, 5.1. 3.4 of that total overall increase is related to the MET rate. So they're going from, if you look in the first column, existing rate, 1,015 to 1,050. So their total rate increase per acre foot is $35. And then if you go down one line to the CB administrative surcharge, our charge is going from 113 to 135. So that's about a 22. The MET rate is $35 increase, and the administrative surcharge for the district is a $22 increase.
But the surcharge for, to answer your question, for 5,000 acre feet would be, the difference would be around $110,000.
It would go up approximately $57 times 5,000 acre feet.
And then the meter surcharge, CFS, that is actually the charge for the meter.
Yes.
It's a per CFS capacity rate. Are you talking about the second line up from the bottom?
Yes. The Central Basin, I'm thinking of CB water meter service charge / CFS.
That's an existing charge.
So in my world where we have meter charges, monthly meter charge for a 1-inch meter, if it's 12%, if it's $12 a month, basically in comparison to this, we're proposing that charge go up by 35%.
And it's approximately $225,000 overall for all customers. And just one comment on the example of a customer who has 5,000 acre feet. We've only had one customer in the last 2 fiscal years is published in our CAFR that is approximately at $5,000.
5,000 acre feet.
5,000 acre feet, thank you.
But what I'm saying is that's 35% increase on my meter, but you've done nothing more for me, but you're increasing my meter charge by 35%. That seems extremely it seems a bit odd to go up that much for the meter. In other words, if I were to go before my customers, I would say, we're going to increase your meter charge by 35%. It seems
And how
high.
much would it generate?
$225,000. If you look at our CAFR, our overall revenue for the prior fiscal year was $47.9 million. So of that $47.9 million, we're talking about a $225,000 increase. So overall, in the net grand scheme of things, it's less than 5% of our total overall revenue. For the prior fiscal year.
Would you be more comfortable if the rate increases were the same for the administrative surcharge and the meter charge, because they both relate to the same type of service?
Well, I talked with one of our fellow directors, and I realized that, we've got to do something. I understand that. But one chart that I'm not seeing here that we would do in the retail community is, besides this, we would do a chart that would reflect what some of the bills would be. In other words, so if,
Sample, yeah.
right, so if a water agency had a bill, I'm being facetious, of I don't know, $100 a month now, it would go up from $100 to $150. And that way we could see how they're going to be impacted, as opposed to this is very, arm's length. It doesn't look like it's going to impact them much. It's only going to bring in $200,000 to us, but I don't know how it's going to impact some of the community out there. And I've heard horror stories of $200,000 to $300,000 increase to them, which seems odd,
Yeah.
because I would think if that's $200,000 to $300,000 to them, then we would be making more money on our side.
We can, for the potable side, we have projections going forward. The meters are fixed, that's the CFS that they have right now. We can do that very quickly, the chart that shows the impact on each of them. And for the potable going forward, we have assumptions. So we can actually put for the potable system the assumptions and what the rate increases. Notice that the dollar actually amount to the rate increases. I don't know if you'd like that bring that to the December board meeting with the final recommendation.
Director Hunter, I think that's an excellent suggestion. In fact, I would even go a step further, because this isn't enough information. I would like to see that for every utility by option 1, 2, 3, and 4. In other words, if you look at the options per just the meter charge versus option 4, you're going to have differences. And I'd like to see that. I'd like to see a report. And I'd like to see the purveyors have an opportunity to look at that as well before we have our next meeting, so that they can see the impacts of this proposed or draft budget. Because I think you're right, this is complex. There's a lot of information in here. I think we owe it to our customers to do that and provide that information as much as we know at this time, and get that out for review.
Okay, Director, again, I just want to we started this thing with an issue of equity that I got slammed for a number of times by the purveyors. This will reopen that issue of equity, because the fixed charge that we put out there was designed to spread the cost over our entire service area. Okay. This now, the way with our existing rate structure, doesn't do that. It concentrates on the people who actually use the water. So there's some people that are free riders who use some of our services, or being met is the biggest one. We are others that are paying. We do that, you understand that the issue of equity then becomes very dramatic, and the ability to navigate through to a final conclusion with something that's not going to be litigated is going to increase. I'm just putting it out there, because I personally could agree with you more. We'll put it out there, we can calculate. It's a simple spreadsheet. We had that when we did it. We can take each of these budgets and divvy it up that way, and see how it comes out. And we'll put that report together and put it out there. But you're still going to have to vote at the end of it.
But as you said, for everyone, you're only talking for those that take imported water or imported water and recycled water? I'm not sure what you mean. Not every
Recycled water complicates it a little bit, because that's going to add to the complexity of the report. But I would do all purveyors. That's fair.
But I would take the recycled, I agree, and put it aside. The recycled, we're trying to have the costs and the benefits match up as a separate item.
Right.
In the potable water side, it's different. You know, people, because I don't think people who are not, other than the standby charge that they pay for the opportunity to have it, I don't think we should be charging for the O&M of the recycle to other people. So the concept was with the fixed charge, that would only be for the potable water part of this. Our charges for our recycled water system are designed to recover all the costs, the standby charge plus that.
Then I would counter and say, then let's start with that first report, and get that out for comment, and then let's hear back from our customers.
Okay?
Well, I don't know what do you mean by giving comments. I mean, the budget process is an open process, it's a workshop, it's an open meeting. Premiers can come in and join the conversation just like anybody else does. They have workshops for the budget, they can come in here, there's some data that is going to be shared, they can speak to it, and then ultimately the board has to make a decision.
And John,
Is that what you're...
that's what I'm saying though, but I think they need to see all the data. I think it's fair to
Yeah,
see,
yeah, we can-
what we've done is we're talking about a proposal here, and this is the first time we've really all delved into it. I would posit.
Yeah, I mean, typically the budget process is maybe one or a number of workshops similar to this, and at the end you will have a meeting and then the board takes a vote on it. So it appears that we're going to have another workshop.
Well, what we normally do is we present whatever we present to the board, either before or after, to the retail, to the purveyor workshop. We'll use that as a forum to discuss this before it goes to the final board meeting. So they'll get it presented and get it done in that time. The issue here, though, you forget, when we started on this, we started back in December. We not only have had workshops with the people, we have had ad hoc committees that came in and poured over our books and gave us their recommendations, etc. We've had a lot of input. We've taken it to heart, and that's why we've crafted option 4, which we believe is a compromise. They didn't want the hated fixed charge. No, I'm glad to present it. I think it'll show the fixed charge will then show us the most equitable charge out there. Glad to reopen that debate. I don't think we have time for much because we have to get a budget done by the 1st of June. But we've been debating and discussing this since December. And I'll put the report together.
And that was my request. Thank you.
We'll get to that.
And when you're doing those charts, there is no reason to do charts based or samples based on option 3 because option 3 is...
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. So
It doesn't work.
why do examples based on something that we know it's not going to work?
But we can do 1, 2, and 4.
Yeah. But before we delve in on a fixed number of 1, 2, and 4, I want to, and this is something that the purveyors have said, this is something that I have said, we need to go back to those recommendations that were made on 12 January, some of the recommendations.
Which we're going to do if we can
Right.
continue.
And
That's exactly where we're
they're not
going.
approved by the board. We ought to revisit those.
Yeah. We're actually going to them right now.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Just to comment, Andrew, so again, looking at this one slide, it seems to me that the med rate, that we can't touch, that's taken care of by others, but maybe we can put those rates that we charge differently. So in other words, potable water rate would be 3.4 minus, if your recommended would be minus 5.1, so the recommended increase would be whatever that is. That'd be 1.5?
Yes, 1.7 overall.
Yeah.
But ours is,
19.8.
it's going up from 113 to 135, which is 19.8%. If you look at that CB
No, I know
administrative,
the
yeah.
CB administrative surcharge, that's all our increase, right? Yeah.
Correct.
But on the potable water rate, that 5.1% isn't all of our increase. A percentage of that is our increase.
Correct. 3.4 is met, 1.7 is us.
Right, so I was thinking,
Overall.
could we show that as well, we can explain that, I guess it doesn't matter. Okay.
So briefly, the revenue volumes increasing slightly in recycled. However, in potable, we're seeing and replenishment decreases. Which brings us to the overall budget summary. As you can see, the budget surplus and deficit line, about the 4th line down, I just want to bring attention to that. Also, the DCR calculation line, you can see in 2018, we're forecasting at 105. That can move. We're not quite done with the year yet, but that is our current estimate, so that is subject to change. And you can see the DCR calculation for each of the options, and what we've done is bolded option number 4 on the far right. Currently, we're at 117. So now, the time that we are requesting the board action and board input. So I have one more slide, and then I'm going to hand it over to our general manager. So to meet the 125 that our financial advisor is recommending, there's approximately $275,000 of further either revenue enhancements or cuts in expenses that the financial advisor is recommending to get to that 125% DCR. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our general manager to conclude, and I'll come back to wrap up.
Let's screw this up. Okay. The first item that we had that was not addressed back on January 12th was to discontinue the retainer for the attorney on the ethics hotline. We've had it for 3 years. We have not had to use it other than have the retainer there. There's only been 2 or 3 calls. We believe that rather than have a retainer of $1,350 a month there, which is $16,000 a year, we can do the same thing by having the responses sent to both the general manager and the attorney when they come in. That way the attorney works for the board, the GM also works for the board, they're separate. And then if the issue involves the GM, then the attorney would take it with the board. If it's attorney, then the GM would take it to the board. But we go through our committee in terms of doing it. We think the original concept served its purpose. It helped us after the audit to stay on the straight and narrow, but it looks like we don't need it right now. So the proposal would be to approve in the budget for next year to discontinue the contract after February. As you recall, it's a 3-year no cut and no continuation. If we do not do that, then we have to do a procurement process and get somebody else in starting in March of 2019. So if it's the board pleasure.
I would make...
What?
I would like to make a motion to...
If we can, as we go along, some of these we can, some maybe we can...
I would like to make a motion to approve the recommendation to discontinue attorney retainer for ethics hotline.
Second.
And the reason is, as we go through these, I don't know what we'll be able to do, but anything we can do to reduce our costs, to show the purveyors that we're working in that direction, because we may have to come back to, a rate increase, so.
Yeah.
Seconded, Hawkins. Roll call.
Director Chicklin? Director Gedney?
I have a question before proceeding. This is a recommendation of the audit, correct? To have a ethics hotline?
Sorry, I missed
This was a recommendation by the auditor to have a hotline?
I don't believe, no, we put it in, this is adopted.
The state auditor recommended, I believe, an ethics hotline. This is just the retainer
You weren't here.
for
Go sit
the,
down.
okay.
Go sit down. Okay. The ethics hotline was something actually as a staff we came up with at the time. The idea was, how do you make the ethics hotline, so to speak, bulletproof, so that it was totally independent of the board. So we proposed to retain the ethics hotline, and that's done by a number of people, but have the response difference, since we haven't used this in 3 years.
So in this hypothetical response, if in a situation in the future something were to occur where both the general manager and the current attorney were part of that issue, the board would have to decide how to deal with that, right?
Exactly. It would always be surfaced, anyone that comes in would be surfaced to the board.
Okay, would there be a pool of Looks like there may be a response here, Dee.
So under our ethics policy, there's two ways that an ethical concern can come up. It can come up through anonymous ways through the hotline, or it can come up to the Administration and Ethics Committee. So in the scenario that you presented, perhaps the avenue there would be the Administration and Ethics Committee be presented with the ethical complaint.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Okay, so what we're going to do is just remove the retainer,
Right,
but retain the hotline.
exactly.
And the format for addressing issues, if they come up in the future, is different than what we have today.
Right, and we'll write a new policy to cover that, and the board will have discussion in the Admin and Ethics Committee on it.
Okay, I'll vote yes.
Director Grajeda,
Yes.
Director Hawkins,
Yes.
Director Oscui,
Yes.
Director Vasquez, President Apodaca.
Yes.
Motion passes by unanimous vote.
The second item that we had up last time was a new charge, a fairly minor one. Metropolitan has two charges that they impose upon Central Basin each year, a fixed charge. One is a readiness to serve charge based upon your 10-year rolling average of water use, and the second is a capacity charge based on your peak use in the summertime between May and September. These are fixed annual charges. We pass them on to our agency. Our formula is a little bit different because we worked it out with our agencies. For example, we only use a 4-year rolling average as opposed to a 10-year rolling average so that people who used water 10 years ago are not hit with trailing costs. But that was worked out with the agencies about 3 years ago. The act of passing through this charge, however, has costs. We actually have a significant amount of analysis that goes in, tracking that goes in with it. So other agencies will often put a surcharge on top of this to handle it. Originally, we proposed a 5% surcharge. We're proposing now a 20% surcharge on this. Simply that the issue, and our actually cost goes down because as a percentage of met use, which is the RTS, our percentage of met use has been going down and will continue to go down as our water use decreases. And concurrent with that, our capacity will go down also. So the proposal here is that we add this new charge, which is a 20% handling charge on the RTS and the capacity charge. And this would generate about $200,000 a year and enable us to spread the cost equitably among the agencies that use it.
Kevin, how did we go from 5% to 20%? What was the logic?
Needed more money. I'll be blunt. The 5% was too low because of the time it takes to process. I've forgotten about the monthly. I just looked at the one time we do it. It's, maybe a week accounts and stuff and checking. But we actually have to check it every month and process it through. And the board can adopt anything in between. There's no.
My question is, I just want to understand how this impacts the customer. Again, in retail, we take a look at it, we describe why we need the increase, and then we describe to the board members who are elected and have to face the customers how that's going to impact them. And so I'm open to the idea, but how does this impact what we just got through talking about regarding option 4, and how does this impact the customer? So I may need you to, unless there's some purveyors here that understand this bill already, I may need you to bring it back with how it impacts the customer.
Well, we'll add it to Director Gedney's chart if you like. It's easy enough to do. We have the criteria that said it's so many 3 years trailing water use or your peak use over a period of time. So we can add that in there and give you the analysis.
I would make a motion not to maintain current practice, but just to move this over until we can get this information from the staff on how it would impact the customers.
Okay, and I think the total, if we're going to generate $200,000 out of it, then the total charge is probably about $1 million.
Well, it would be- it would be
So
anywhere between
it'll be
5 or
split up. I mean, yes, we'll be able to give you the breakdown for how it impacts the agencies going forward.
Yeah, so the option 4 didn't include this in there, right?
No.
So we need to have a clear picture of
Yeah.
the bottom line. That's it.
These are ones we're looking to enhance the required board action.
So we would just pass on this one, correct?
Yeah, so you just pass on this and I'll bring it back again. We'll have to
Very
vote
good.
on it.
That'd be great.
And again, what it'll do, it'll enhance our DCR. Third one that was teed up is eliminating the bottled water program. Again, this is one over the last 3 years. Its average cost has been about $18,000 all in. It's a very useful outreach tool. We found it to be that way. We get requests for it on a constant basis, but it was one of the items brought up.
If I could supersede, I understand all that. Would the board be willing to at least look at maybe cutting it in half? Maybe not eliminate the entire program.
There's the option 2, which is reduced to 5 cases per event, which is 7,500, roughly about one half of it.
Would the board consider option, I'd like to make an option, motion to approve option 2, reducing it. I don't know if 8,000 makes a difference. I know you put it as 7,500, but I mean 9,000.
When you have dire situations, you've got to make dire decisions.
Yeah, I agree.
You don't want to completely eliminate that.
Right.
You want to have some sort of a presence.
Yeah.
You said it's.
And there are occasions where for public health and welfare, we have contributed far over 10 cases. When the fire happened in Pico Rivera or for the Sativa situation, we've sent 100 cases each time.
I'd support your motion.
Well, I think this is very important to us. Our cities like it. Everybody that we deal with, they pretty much call us for this kind of stuff.
Because it's free.
And it's free.
Yeah.
And we do limit the amount that they do get, because at one time there was no limit, and we put some limits on it, and I'd hate to see this go away, because I know my cities, they rely on it for all their health communities, their little health fairs, the colleges for their college fairs, for all this, and they call us. In fact, we've had to cut some people off just because we didn't have enough water. And so if we cut this back, I think it's a community service that we need to have. And the original program here is we would do no advertising, we would do no outreach, we would use, our bottle program would be because we had our name on it. And that was one reason we went to this, because it was cheaper at the time, and now we're going to cut it. So I'm not really for this.
We're not cutting it completely with the option 2, Director.
Reducing from 5, the option on the table is reducing from 5 to 5 cases per event.
Okay, I was trying to find.
Director Hawkins, with all due respect, I agree with you. I understand your point, and I wish we didn't have to do this. And I was hoping that by not eliminating it completely, yes, sir, we are cutting it in half, and I'm sorry about that. More first come, first serve. But I just think that right now we're in a dire situation for this particular year, and if you could just strongly consider that.
I'd like to, at this time, if we can table this issue, because our other colleagues aren't here who are more impacted by it, whereas I understand the concerns of our other directors, but it was done at a time when Central Basin's name wasn't even accepted, much less wanting to receive that water. And we went through a lot to get that acceptance. And now to cut it off.
So I'll bring this back at the board meeting at the end of the month with the
Yes.
other one.
Well, with all due respect, truly with all due respect, Mr. President, this is an extremely important meeting we're having here today, and I'm not sure why other directors aren't here, sir. And to push this because they're not, I'm a little taken back about that. But these are also dire times, and I think we're trying to...
Personally, I am not for cutting, so I wouldn't be.
So if you're not for cutting, it wouldn't pass anyway, so.
So let's
Not a
table this
courtesy
one.
to us,
Let's-
with you,
We'll table.
that we're tabling it that time.
And just for the record,
That's fine.
Director Chacon is home with a very sick wife, and Director Vasquez is at the Aqua Conference.
Let's table this one and go through the ones that have
Okay.
a bigger dollar value attached.
Good. Fourth one is a reduction of the HRA benefit. Again, this one, at the time we teed it up in January, looked like it was fertile ground for a revision. There's been one change since then. We've adopted a new health care program, which saves us $110,000 plus a year. However, it does increase the contribution of the employees, the deductible, and the contribution per visit, and the HRA is one way to compensate for that. The proposal we had back then was to reduce it from the $4,000 per person, $4,000 per spouse, and $4,000 per children, a total of 12, to a $3,000 limit. The actual use based on actual use, if we cut it as we're talking about, there's 36 participants. That would be, they're down from 40 last year, and the savings would be about $34,000 with this change. But again, this was proposed before the change in the medical plan.
Well, this is another one. I think we've already made the cuts, and by changing the plan, we're saving quite a bit more than we would by changing any of this. So I don't see the reason we need to do this right now.
We need to have additional savings, sir.
Have additional what?
Savings.
Well, we've already, this is some of those, we got to cut, but where do we stop cutting? We've already changed the plan to save $100 and some thousand.
That's wonderful, but...
That's wonderful, so now let's keep on going, let's go to the next thing. Instead of cutting something to where it's almost of no value, and then go to the next one, I mean, there's got to be a stop here somewhere.
There is a value for having a HRA account of $3,000. There is a value, that's a benefit.
Well, again, Director, with all due respect, the district provides benefits to all the employees, retirees, board members, and their dependents. And the district provides a very good benefits package.
It's a Cadillac plan. I mean,
On top of that, the district provides additional monies for expenditure, and that's what the HRA program is. It's not like we're taking away benefits. It's not like we're taking away medical benefits from the retirees, employees, and board members, sir. It's just, again, dire times. We're trying to see if we can reduce our expenses. And at this point in time, I'm not suggesting that we take the entire thing off the table, but the benefits, the medical benefits, the dental benefits package, the vision package, that's all still in place. This is on top of that. This is on top of that. And when we approved the plan with CalPERS to save money, there was a larger deductible to the staff that was going to be hit. But I asked you, I said, are you relying on this program to pay for that? And I can't remember what your answer was, but they do use it now. But all I'm saying, directors, is that we're trying to look at this again in a different eye, maintaining status quo. The whole reason for being here today, having all of the meetings that we had with the purveyors and everyone, is because status quo is not working. And that's why we're trying to look at this again. If not 3,000, is there a middle ground? Something.
The plan that we offer through CalPERS, that is the most expensive plan, isn't it?
It is the richest plan.
It's the richest plan.
The issue here with a middle ground, for each $1,000, say you made it $4,000, it basically would eliminate any benefit. Even though this is a very rich plan, we're only saving $34,000 by cutting out the $4,000 for your children, $4,000 for your wife, and reducing it to $3,000. It only saves $34,000. So if you change it to $4,000, then we get some, what savings will we get? Just roughly, Dina, I know math ain't you.
I still need to do the calculation. Can I get back to you?
Okay.
That's all right. That's
Yeah.
all right.
But we'd save a lesser amount, but that would be a compromise. We could approve a $4,000 and,
There's other things, but I'm going to make the motion. And I understand, directors. I do. I truly understand. I'm going to make the motion that we accept, reduce the benefits levels to 3,000 for all participants, irrespective of number of dependents, and eliminate option to roll over unused funds for 1 year. Savings of $34,000.
I'm going to second the motion.
Director Chacon? Director Gedney?
Yes.
Director Grajeda?
Yes.
Director Hawkins?
No.
Director Oscui?
Yes.
Director Vasquez? President Apodaca?
No.
okay.
Motion fails.
Motion fails, okay. Did we miss the school one? Or is it? Okay. Next one that was up back then was the director's travel allowance, sensitive issue. Currently, it's budgeted at $7,000. Well, the amount they're authorized is $7,000 per year per director to attend conferences and travel on district business. There's a set list of conferences that you can attend. This is a theoretical amount of $56,000. Not all directors utilize it. Not all directors utilize the total amount. So we normally budget it for $48,000. And this last year, as part of the budget cutting process, the board agreed to cut it to $24,000, which is $3,500 roughly per director.
So Kevin, when you say not all directors use it, what do you mean by that?
Well, for example, several of the appointed directors have said, no, thank you, I won't be going to any conferences this year, won't be using it. Several of the elected directors simply don't use all the amount. They don't go to that number of conferences. Director Apodaca is usually significantly under, for example. And we take that into account when we do our budgeting, so rather than budget for the theoretical max, we budget for what is the average usage.
So it seems like it wouldn't harm the directors to reduce it that much.
It's a question. Matter of fact, I'd be blunt about it. The amount used to be $5,000. I increased it to $7,000 to encourage the directors to go to water conferences. I recommended the increase and they approved it because the conferences that they attend, for example, the upcoming contract cities, is very important to this community. But equally important is that you go to Aqua, to the urban waters, so we learn about the water policy issues that we discussed. So. At $3,500, we think a director can go to 2.5, maybe 3 conferences a year. At $4,000 or $5,000, obviously go to more. $7,000, they can go to all of the ones they want.
Whenever any agency talks about tightening the belt, one of the first items that goes away is the travel expenses. Now, I get that we are in a business that is very sensitive and we have to bring information back. But again, I'll say when you tighten the belt, perhaps not all directors, not 3 or 4 or 5 have to go to the same conference. Maybe one director can go to a certain conference and the other one can go to another one. That way you can bring the knowledge back, you can bring the information back that is going to be beneficial to the district, but yet you are managing your costs. So I don't see any reason why we cannot live with the reduced amount, to be honest, and then maintain that goal of being able to attend in order to bring back viable information to the district's benefit.
Good point, Director. In the proposed motion, reducing it to 3,500, we authorize that the general manager be authorized in consultation with the board president to approve additional travel if deemed in the best interest of the district. For example, a couple of years ago, we needed Director Hawkins to go attend the Aqua JPIA.
Sure.
And we authorized him, and he went up, and we're very
I'll make a
thankful that he
motion
did.
to go with the recommended action by staff, which is option number 1. Is there a second?
Before I second that, would you just explain something? The directors currently get 7,000.
Right.
I thought you said that we reduced it.
This year at one of the earlier sessions, if you look, we reduced it in half, and the board voted for that.
Okay, so...
But that was just for that 1 year.
So the board voted for it to be at what, 3,500?
Yeah, the time. And that's it's a policy thing in the code. I guess it's in the code. It's at,
So that's current. So we would just make that permanent going forward with this action. Or no, we're doing it just for 1 more year is what we're doing.
well, we're setting it for next year's budget is what we're doing.
But we approved it for this year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, this is something that I think we should encourage our directors to get out. We're the best PR that we have, and we're not using it. We should be out in front of these people. Okay, give you an example. It was an odd conference, and I went to the sanitation district, their conference. And they had put on quite a show, and it was all about how their expenses were going up. And it was going up because they couldn't use chemicals as much as they could before. They had to use UV. And the UV, and they're going to have to buy more land, and they're going to have to do this, and they couldn't afford it at the time. We wouldn't have known anything about that, and we wouldn't have been able to support their issue if we don't know their issues, and we're left out of all that. And this is where director comes in. This is part of our job as far as to represent the people at these different organizations so that we can bring that information back. And if we're going to limit ourselves to 1 conference or 2 conferences a year, and maybe we should be seeing more, not less. And same thing with, we went to another conference, Bob and I did, and this was a few years ago, and they were demonstrating meters. We don't have meters, so we didn't know anything about it. They were showing the meters that now you could do meters, you could drive by in a truck with a computer and you could read the meters as everything was going on. We happened to have those flyers and gave it to some of our purveyors that this is what they were showing at that meeting. We wouldn't have known anything about that because that's not what we do, and that's not where but now we can understand what our purveyors or the people that we associate with, what they're going through. Otherwise, we're in our own little world over here, and we're making decisions without some of that knowledge. So I think this is a very important thing. Some people don't think it is, but I tend to think this is very important for all of us. And same thing with contract cities. Now, we all go to contract cities, and the reason for that is I get to talk to my city managers without an appointment, without anything, sitting in the lobby. I get to talk to all my city managers, to my city council people, to my different commissioners in my different cities and find out what they're going through, and I get to explain what we're doing here without an appointment, without a time schedule, without anything, and we're eliminating all that. And to me, that's not good for us.
Director, what
We're
about...
not eliminating it, sir.
Yeah. What about a compromise where you move it back to the level it used to be, 5,000, which was considered appropriate up until last year?
Did we lose anything by going to 3,500 last year? That's what. There is a cost-benefit analysis to everything.
And what we lost, for example, we have only 1 director up at Aqua right now, which is a big conference. It just had some big water things.
And what is the setback when that happens?
Again, it's a loss of knowledge. Now, we only send... we
Can
used to
that
send,
knowledge be transferred by that 1 director who's attending?
theoretically.
Okay.
Okay. We have 1 staff attending. Normally, Aqua is a big conference. We would have 3 or 4. We cut that out of our budget 2 years
I'm
ago.
not saying this is a permanent issue that we're going to institute and, it's going to be here for another 10 years. What I'm suggesting is when you have a dire economic situation that you have to consider, then you take things that perhaps were out of our norm Perhaps we're not used to them. Perhaps we are going to be uncomfortable with them, but those are the decisions that we have to make. Again, it's an extraordinary measure that we have to take in order to, we have to live within our means, and we haven't.
I'd say put it over and there's two other directors here that are going to be affected by it, and let them participate in this.
I'm fine with pushing this on to when the full board's here, Mr. President, that's fine. So
Okay.
we'll be bringing that one back.
Okay, we'll bring that one back. The next one is a very sensitive one and a very sad one for me. This is already grounded in the budget. I just want you to know that. This is a significant program. We've had this program for over 20 years. It has served over 300,000 students, significantly more than that. It's a program that enhances the quality of life in our service area. It's very well respected, and all the comments from the teachers of schools, and frankly even other agencies, are very complimentary about it. The total cost of the program to us, normal years, is about $330,000, salary, wages, plus outside costs. We're going to look at the feasibility of outside contributions and a supplemental program to supplement it and to grant funding. That would be a multi-year process to do. Theoretically, it could be included in the standby thing, but right now it's a significant program because of the dire situation and because of the fact that the hole in the budget is so big. We're proposing to cut this program. And that's committed in the budget right now. So any decision that you make, if you decide to keep it, then obviously we'll make the rates go up again from what we
We keep
proposed.
talking about the constituents and, the benefits that we pass on to them through the decisions that we make. What did you hear about this particular one from the purveyors that you had a series of meetings with?
Again, you have to understand, most of the purveyors that were attendant there were mid-level managers and had absolutely no idea about the school program because the school...
I beg to differ on that assessment of yours, but
Well, you can...
what was it, without insulting, what was it that you heard from them? That was my question.
I heard from them, and none of them had any appreciation for what it was whatsoever, and that times were tough and we needed to cut it. That's why it's in here.
That's what I wanted.
I do listen, yeah.
Thank you.
But again, the program, the beneficiaries are children in the schools in this community.
You know what? The school districts have been getting a lot of money from the state. Things have changed ever since 5 years ago. Things have, certainly have, the curriculums have changed ever since 20 years ago. Hey, I don't have anything against educating the kids, to be honest with you. That's not the issue. The issue is when you have a situation where you have to save money, you have to look everywhere. And, although this has served, our constituents well in the past, again, things have changed. There are other ways of educating the kids about water conservation, water resources, water programs. And, if there is grant money that comes in, or if the school districts want to participate in that cost, if it's a zero cost to us, let's continue it. But if there is any cost to us, I don't support that.
Yeah, no, the cost right now, if you do it right, is about $300,000 to $330,000 a year.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Let me add something to, if I can. When I came and was elected in 1995, there wasn't any conservation. And the purveyors didn't have anything going for them as far as educating the general public about reducing the amount of water consumed or wasted. And when we did go into conservation, everybody benefited from it. And it not only helped us, but helped the purveyors and our cities. It's something that could affect us in the future with the 20% that has to be met by 2020. To cut this would not be the best thing at this time. I believe there should be some changes on this, but not to cut it totally.
And Director, this is the school program, not our conservation program. Our conservation program continues, and that will help us make it. But this is the long-term education, and that's been responsible for some of the attitude changes of the people you directly. I mean, it's a long-term education. It's been a very beneficial program, but again, it's a big expense, so.
If the school district makes the decision or recognizes the fact that this program is beneficial to the education of their kids, let them ask for it and pay for it, and we'll be gladly supplying the information to them. But it shouldn't be free to the school districts. I'm sorry, it shouldn't be free to them.
Kevin, my question is, currently, I wouldn't know what slide it is. That's page 41. I don't know if it coincides with slide 41 that talks about overall budget summary, option 1, option 2, option 3, and option 4. As option 4 is being proposed now, it includes the reduction of this program.
That's right.
So if we do not take action on this, which is what you're asking us to do, then option 4 as it stands right now goes away.
Well, option 4 goes the same revisions that anything else in here we're doing, but it makes our problem are bigger. Again, this was a very tough thing. We've seen this on the horizon.
But if I could clarify, of all the things we're looking at right now, this is one of the ones that affects option 4. I don't think anything else affected option 4 that we've looked at so far.
No, this is the only one that affects it. The others affect it in a positive way. This affects it in a negative way.
Before we eliminate it, could we revamp it?
We have, Director.
No, but I mean, okay, I just heard, and I think I've even brought this up a few years ago, is because we have so many schools want this program. Everybody wants it because it's free, and it's very good. What if we said, we'll keep it in place, but now you do have to add, you have to pay this, this, and this to get that program. We'd have fewer people applying, and we'd save some more money. But is there something we could do like that? Because you said there's no conservation. There is conservation in that, right, Mark? Yeah, because I remember his posters and stuff that he has with the kids, and it shows them saving water with the brushing their teeth and flushing the toilets and all that kind of stuff. So there is definitely a conservation portion of this. Is there some way that we could revamp this program instead of scrapping it? I don't know.
We had tried to reduce the scope of it in the last year. We cut it from serving, basically, we cut the funding in a third. It used to be 150 outside, we cut it down to 50. But then you're not getting the bang for your buck. You have a person who's an expert in that area who's being used a third of his time. I mean, this is it was not an easy decision to propose. I think those of you who know me know that's the case. It's someone's career and job who happens to be a very nice man that I respect greatly. So I don't look at it lightly, but I didn't see any way around it. I did listen to the purveyors. I didn't agree with them, but I listened. Okay, and this is one of the ones that they simply didn't think it was appropriate for the water people to be paying for it.
When you calculated this dollar amount, does this have to do with, I forgot his name, the clown? Is this?
No.
That doesn't include him in this?
This includes both the inside, the staff, and the outside, the contracts. So we have the magician, the eco-magician.
The magician, that's what I was thinking of.
The busing to tours and stuff like that.
So I'm not sure if you heard from those middle managers that attended.
You can tell it was a little miffed on this one.
I'm just having fun with you, sorry. But a number of cities, including the cities who happen to be the water agency of that entity, have similar programs for the school districts. So there are some certain overlaps. I know other water agencies do educational programs for school districts as well. So we are not the only one who does that. I mean, a number of the cities do that for their school districts. We do it. Other water agencies do it. So if we are focusing on the purpose of this, which is educating the kids, I urge you to consider that is still going to be done with or without our presence. So if the goal is to educate the kids, it gets done. All I'm saying is that if they want additional layer, additional services from us, they have to pay for it. Request it and pay for it. Or come through grant money.
I'm going to make the motion. I'm going to make the motion that we eliminate the program completely in keeping with option 4, in trying to get as close to option 4 as possible regarding the rates. I don't know that I'm 100% behind that, but I'm making the motion because without the recommendation to eliminate this program completely, option 4 goes up. It gets increased. Is that correct, Kevin? Am I saying that right? And so that's the only reason that's the main reason why I'm making the motion to, and I guess it would be, if you would help me, Kevin, I guess it would be for item 2, it would be recommended action that the board approve to eliminate the water education program savings of $150,000.
Yes.
That would be my motion, and I'm making it so that we can get as close to option 4 as possible.
I'll second that.
Director Chuckwan? Director Gedney?
Yes.
Director Grajeda?
Yes.
Director Hawkins?
I'm going to abstain.
Director Oskouyi?
Let me say yes, but before I do that, let's say the whole conversation today has been around a good portion of it, the need to have the DCR at a number bigger than 115. Our projection for this next year is 117. That hardly leaves any cushion for anything. Last year we talked over and over and over again that our projections for potable water was a little bit optimistic. What if something happens and you can't meet that? Again, the difference between 117 and 115 is nothing. What if we fall below 115? Yes.
Director Vasquez? President Apodaca?
I know the difficulty we have with our budget, but I also know what educational programs have meant to the district, and to say my own district, the 2nd district, and Mark can attest to that, my school districts support it totally. I'm up this year, but in the situation, if it means that, the district goes on, whether I'm here or not, I'll support your motion.
Director Hawkins, you do understand that abstaining is the same as a no vote?
So, did you vote for it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll change mine to a yes, reluctantly.
Thank you, Director Hawkins. Thank you, Director.
Motion passes.
Just bring me a burrito once in a while.
Okay, the next one is an easy one, right? We eliminate or reduce the car allowance for directors and the general manager. I have a $500 month allowance. The board has approximately a $400 month allowance. Total cost is $29,820. The survey showed the mileage and reimbursement for car allowances are traditional for general manager and directors in Southern California. The audit, however, had recommended that we go to a mileage-only type approach. Directors can choose to reduce, modify, or eliminate the car allowance, was what we discussed before. And so the motion is to, 1, either eliminate the car allowance and replace it with mileage. 2nd, reduces the board deems appropriate, or 3, maintain status quo.
I don't think we should eliminate it completely, Kevin.
We have done a lot ever since 2 or 3 years ago to comply with the recommendations of the audit. We have been trying to be transparent in all aspects. I think it is not fair for the directors or the GM to utilize their personal vehicle for district-related purposes and not get compensated for it. But I think it's also fair to say that the compensation could be equitably done in the form of a mileage reimbursement, which happens to be the recommendation by the audit. So I support that.
So is that
That's a motion.
for one? I second that motion.
That for number 1, just to confirm?
Yes.
Director Chacon?
Could you hold on the call file? Is there any movement on that at all?
As you recall, the directors had a significant debate about this when we did the audit, and they reduced their car allowance by $200 a month at that
See,
time.
the three new ones are a little different than us as far as mileage. I mean, I've got 7 cities. Okay, I had a speaking engagement last week at the Optimus Club. I was at the Rotary Club not too long ago. I was at the Women's Club not too long ago. I drive to all these different cities. I see a lot of city councils. I use mine. And for me to start cutting back on this, I'll have to cut back on some of my other stuff, and I don't...
You're still going to get paid for it, sir, but it's going to be per mileage.
Exactly. I use this mileage.
The audit recommendation was before the legislation, so it didn't have to
It
do
was
anything with us.
suggested, and we did reduce it considerably for the audit, and now here we're going
It's suggested to
again.
be per mileage,
Right, I'm a no.
and it is not.
Director Gedney?
I vote yes.
Director Grajeda?
I'll vote yes.
Director Hawkins?
No.
Director Oscui?
Yes.
Director Vasquez? President Apodaca?
No.
Fails.
Okay, last, we have CalPERS employer paid contribution. As you know, in the district, the history was that the district has paid fully for the employee share. Now, when PEPRA passed, new employees that come in, like Andrew or myself, we pay our share of it. In different districts, it's done differently. Some pay their share, some don't. This is one of those benefits that does become visible. The proposal here is over 3 years that the phase in, so that all of these staff pays, the proposal is that over the next 3 years, the staff increases their contribution to, at the end of 3 years, all staff are paying the 6.5% of salary of PEPRA. Now, I did this at a prior district. At that time, the commitment was made because it was a recognition that that benefit resulted in lower salaries. People understood that that's a direct cash benefit. Our salaries happen to be in the lower quartile in our area, and that's Dean will be glad to provide the documentation. So I would propose that if that's the case, we want to do this, that the employees be guaranteed to get a raise of at least that amount over the next 3 years to compensate for it.
I don't feel comfortable supporting a reduction benefit to the employees when we are not considering reducing travel expenses or complying with the requirement of the audit for car allowance. I can't do that.
I would like to see, Kevin, this discussion. I'm trying to get my arms around all these various components of the benefits to the employees and to retirees' benefits and directors, and I think that the whole scope of it should be looked at, everything on the table, and take a look at it and see how it impacts the employee. You know, salaries, freezing salaries, those kinds of things. At one point in time, the employees looked at changing the medical from JPIA to CalPERS. We didn't consider the possibility, I believe we pay full costs for the dependents. We didn't take a look at that, so I agree with Director Escue. I'm not for considering this at this time either.
Yes, maybe next year we could have a workshop strictly on benefits and
That'd
go
be
through it at that time and make a more informed
We
decision.
should do a salary survey. I
Yeah.
think we should look at our entire package and take a look at the entirety of the package that we offer to our employees, because employee retainage is also extremely important.
Yeah. Okay, we will set that up for sometime in the second quarter next year. Andrew, do we have board authorized revisions?
So if Albert can bring up the slide, thank you. Thank you very much. So based on the board action on the last 8 items, it approved item number 1, which was to discontinue the attorney retainer of $7,000, and item number 6, and that amount did change from the first pass of this $150,000, so that is accurately at $230,000. If you look at the very bottom line, is row 18, you can see the current DCR is 116.8. Thank you, Albert. And with the reduction of item number 1 for $7,000, we've increased our DCR 0.2% to 117.0%. Now we've highlighted items 2, 3, and 5. If we have reflected those accurately, those 3 items the board, I believe, said to bring back at the next workshop. So there is potential for those 3 additional items to be considered and potentially enhance the DCR to approximately 125%. So with that, I think I'm going to take back over into the presentation. To kind of wrap things up, option number 4 was the compromise, the preferred option. We're trying to get to the 125. 115 is required. And number 3 is staff, along with input from all the related parties, tried to nominally increase rates just to the minimum required amount. Next steps, if I'm hearing the board correctly, I think you want us to bring back the spreadsheet. I'm sure we can email that out to the board prior to the next meeting. If it's the board's desire, we could have another workshop or go directly to the May board meeting to consider those 3 additional items.
And we don't have time for another workshop. I think we just scheduled it for the next board meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go straight to the number 2, the board meeting in May. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you. General Counsel's report?
A report today.
Okay. General Manager's report?
No report.
Director's comments? Anyone?
I just would like to say thank you to staff. Thank you for the presentation. The budget report was very detailed. We'd like some more information, but thank you for all that. It helped explain a lot of things to me, so I appreciate it. And thank you to the directors for taking the actions you took today.
Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.